greet you all in the name of our Lord Jesus. This is Harbinger of the Last Trump. I want to talk about the nation of America and reveal one of, if not the greatest secret or hidden things about her never revealed by any man since she became a nation. What you are about to hear in this message and divine revelation about America will shock you. Among other areas of her life, I shall be bringing to our knowledge the 252-year lifespan of America from the date of her independence and the last 10 years of her existence from the year 2021. Yes, from the year 2021. Please watch this video to the end because of the incredible information about the nation of America and the imminent Fourth World War, which is about to take place right now, and so many other things associated with it. It is a must watch. Now, in this video, you shall be amazed to hear that this so-called nation or God's own country was indeed founded by Satan himself, with very clear references to it in the Holy Bible. Also, in this video, you shall be hearing for the first time that the end of the nation of America means the end of this age, because God positioned her to be the last empire or greatest nation on earth and to consummate the last 2,520 years of this age from 490 BC with her lifespan of 252 years, with proofs of this also in the Bible. This video also reveals the fact that the next president of America is technically the last of her history. All these with hard facts. There is so much that the Lord revealed to me concerning America that I cannot share all in this video. Most are there in my book entitled The Trinity Code. The book is already on the net, on my website, but I'm still updating it. When I'm done, it shall finally be released to the world. Now, let's hear some of the things about this titanic nation of this age before I take us to the main part of this revelation. To begin with, America falls into the category of the greatest, richest, strongest, and most knowledgeable entity in terms of science and technology to ever exist on earth. In this category, she is the wealthiest after the kingdom of Israel in the day of the King Solomon, the wealthiest man to ever live on earth. The titanic military strength of America today compares to the incredible strength of the strongest man to ever live on earth, one man who is able to kill over 1,000 people in one battle, with reference to Samson of the Bible. The level of her wisdom and knowledge in the area of science and technology compares only to that of the King Solomon, still, who was the wisest man in his day to live on earth, or the wisest man ever to live on earth. And from the perspective of the Judeo-Christian theology, America is the greatest nation ever born by a colonial master in terms of her announcing the God of heaven to the world, especially in her early days, as John the Baptist did with Christ, whom Christ declares as the greatest of all men born into this world by a woman. I'm presenting this from a religious perspective or from a religious background. Please pardon me for that. Now, let's move on. Some people argue about America or her presence in the Bible, especially the prophetic aspect of the Bible in relation to the end part of this age. Many thought that she is not in biblical prophecy, but indeed, America is represented in the Bible, and she's one of the major players of the eschatological drama of this age. The reason some people are not seeing America in the Bible is that they do not have the knowledge that events were meant by God from the beginning of time to be repeated in our history 2, 3, and in some occasions 4 times to the end of this age. And by the way of the Spirit, in the area of identifying past events with their present or future correspondence. It is the name of the past event or whatever, for instance, a nation or an empire, that is being applied to the future ones. That is how spirits operate. The important thing one should pay attention to is the characteristics of the past ones being manifested by the contemporary ones or their contemporary correspondences. This nation or an empire or a figure can be identified, especially if one, for instance, knows the nation or the figure in the past God or the Bible was alluded to in the future. In the case of the nation of America, God used the ancient Babylonian kingdom and the ancient nation of Tyros to allude to her in this end part of this age. You can see this in the book of Jeremiah chapter 50 and Ezekiel chapter 26 to chapter 27, respectively. Though they also describe the Roman Empire, as God identifies the one with the other or sees both of them as one. You can see this very clearly in the book of Revelation chapter 17 with reference to Mystery Babylon, which the Lord used to depict both America and the Roman Empire. Now, for the examples of God using a past nation or a prominent figure in time past to describe a current or a future corresponding one, see Ezekiel chapter 31 to chapter 32, where God used the Pharaoh of Egypt and Assyria, the ancient name of the modern day Syria, and symbolic name for Satan, to describe the devil. When you consider these chapters carefully, you would know that the reference there were to Satan and not to the nation of Assyria and the Pharaoh of Egypt. This is a very good example of what I'm saying here. Unknown to many, America was projected by God in the Bible as the last empire or greatest nation to exist to the end of this age, not China, which the world think, or most people in the world think, shall be taken over from America in the nearest future. This was recorded and coded in Jeremiah chapter 50 verse 12, that is the last nation status of America of this age. In this portion of the Bible, the word hindmost used to prophetically describe this status of America means the last, the farthest back, or the end. This is very clear there. Remember, I said earlier that God positioned America to consummate the last 2,520 years of the last 5,040 years of this age, which have lifespan of 252 years in this regard. Therefore, those thinking that China is about taking over from America as the next world empire would never see that happen in this age, except when we find ourselves in another planet at another human revolution. Even if the Lord delays his coming for another 200 years, China can never occupy the place of America in this present planet Earth or this age. There are other mysteries associated with this which the sons of men know not. I cannot say them here now. Let's move forward. America as Israel is a first fruit nation, that is, a firstborn nation which began a new era. This mystery is tied to Christ, who by status and by nature is the house of God, the beginning of God's creation, and the beginning of a new dawn in heaven at the beginning of time. This firstborn status of America and her Pentecostal birth as the 12th-part Christ in heaven, the 12th-part nation of Israel, and the 12th-part church was reflected in her birth on a Pentecostal month, that is, the month of June 4th specifically, and with 12 nations of the former colonies of Britain, as the number 12 is identified with Pentecost. Her 50 states, which she is also made of, is a reflection of her connection with Pentecost. And coupled with this is the fact that America was the Pentecostal beginning of the modern history of humanity, which falls to the end part of the history of man in this age. Remember, the Lord in Matthew chapter 20 verse 16 says that the first shall be the last, in relation to what I said, or what the Bible recorded about America prophetically in Jeremiah chapter 50 verse 12, concerning her status as the last nation of this age, which by status was the beginning of modern history, yet is the last nation to rule to the end of this age. The devil, who was her founder, as we are about to discover in the Bible, is also a 10-part entity and the beginning of angels in heaven, that is, the firstborn of all angels in heaven. This reality is reflected in the book of Job chapter 40 verse 19, and in his status title in this regard, with reference to his son of the morning title in Isaiah chapter 14 verse 12, which means son of the beginning, or simply beginning. Note, in the spirit, America is identified with Satan, just as Israel is identified with Christ spiritually. With regard to this, note, in the spirit, it is a principle that a nation or a man should bear the name of his or her spiritual prince or guide or second personality in mystical terms. Now, concerning this, the majority of Christians and the Jews themselves are unaware of the fact that the name Israel, which they, the 12 tribe nations of God, is bearing till date, is one of the heavenly or sacred names of Christ, the 12th part, who is their veiled God and King. Against any doubt, see this very clearly in Isaiah chapter 49 verse 3 and read down to verse 6 for confirmation of this reality. And then see it also in the code of Hosea chapter 11 verses 1 to 2. And then open your eyes to 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 14 and compare it with Isaiah chapter 65 verse 1 in this regard. People of God, open your eyes widely and see this reality in these scriptures just referenced. Concerning this, if I may ask, what is the meaning of Israel? It simply means he shall rule as God. Now, from biblical reality, it is clear that Christ is currently ruling over the entire universe as God. This which he himself made clear in Revelation chapter 2 verses 26 to 27 and was confirmed by the Apostle Paul, the greatest of all of the apostles of Christ, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verses 23 to 28. Meanwhile, America's status of liberty with a torch in its hand is a symbol of Satan and his bright nature, by which he was given the title Light Bearer, who initiated liberty in heaven, which caused some of the angels of God to go out of the way of law and order, as America, his national expression on earth, has successfully done in the world, especially in this current generation, which began between the birth of our empire and the rebirth of the nation of Israel. Remember, I said earlier that America is identified with the devil, or she is a national expression of the devil, as Israel is a national expression of the 12th part Christ, and that the devil was her founder. Now, let me prove this reality. In Ezekiel chapter 28, verses 14 to 16, Satan, which is the strongest and most beautiful angel in heaven, as America on earth, is seen as a covering cherub. This which means protector, as he was created for the protection of the throne place of God in heaven, located on the holy mountain of God in heaven. See it in the same verses just quoted. On earth, America, which is an earthly correspondence and a national expression of Satan, is a national covering cherub to the throne place of God on earth, with reference to the land of Israel generally. She is fulfilling this principle on the platform of repetition of primordial events in heaven without her knowledge. Even Nostradamus, over 500 years ago, and over 200 years to her birth, called her the protector of the holy people with reference to the Israelites. Now, is there any nation on earth more committed to the protection and security of Israel since her birth in 1948 than America? Though Europe is also committed, but America has been the foundation of her protection and security. Remember, I brought it to our knowledge that the ancient nation of Tyros in Ezekiel chapter 26 verses 3 to 4 was used by God to describe or allude to the future nation of America. Then see it in Isaiah chapter 23 verses 15 to 18 that the same Tyros was identified with Satan. Match that portion of the Bible with Revelation chapter 20 verses 1 to 3 and verses 7 to 10 for confirmation of this disclosure. Now, coming back to Satan as the founder of the land or the nation of America. Remember, I pointed us to the book of Ezekiel chapter 31 and chapter 32, where God used the Pharaoh of Egypt and the nation of Assyria to describe Satan. The focus now is on Assyria, which God used to allude to Satan as her founder, that is America. Before I bring this particular scripture to us, let us further establish the fact of the identification of Assyria with the devil, as the nation of Israel is being identified with Christ. This which I made reference to earlier in Isaiah chapter 49 verses 3 to 6. Note, this reality is properly put in the old King James Version of the Bible. Take note of this. Now, in Micah chapter 5 verses 5 and 6, the Bible stated prophetically that the people of God during the millennium period of peace on earth, or at the end part of that period, will say that the Lord is their peace when the Assyrian shall encroach into their border and bring a fight to them. Now, Revelation 20 verses 7 to 10 is the fulfillment of this in relation to the end part of the millennium period of peace on earth, when Satan shall be loosed from the bottomless pit to deceive the nations of the world for the last time and gather them against the people of God at the absence of Christ at that point. Now, see it that in Ezekiel chapter 31 verses 1 to 3, God projected Satan there, or used the name Assyria to refer to Satan. It is very clear there, especially when you read the whole of the chapter and the next chapter. Now that this has been established, let's see where in the Bible God referred to the same Satan as the founder of America in the code of the name Babylon or Chaldean. This is found in Isaiah chapter 23 verse 13. Match the next verse with Revelation chapter 18 in relation to the same America at the time of our final destruction at the end part of the Great Tribulation. Now, let's move over to her lifespan of 252 years. This area of her life is very interesting. The nation of America has 252 years for her lifespan between her birth in 1777 at the end of her Revolutionary War with Britain and in the calendar of the Spirit, and the time of her end in this age, that is between her birth and her end at the end part of this age, span the period of 252 years from the year 1777. This might surprise you, but I have a lot of incredible information to prove this beyond doubt, as revealed to me by the Lord. God intended her lifespan to consummate the last 2,520 years of the last 5,040 years of this age, which measure from 477 years after the death of Adam at 3009 BC precisely. Meanwhile, the end of America at the end of her lifespan means the end of this age, because God regulated the days of her life to end or coincide with the end of the Fourth World War, which the sons of men refer to as the Third World War. The 252-year lifespan of America measures 1/10 of the biblical time cycle of 2,520 years God uses in fulfilling or concluding part of his plan on earth. But it is the 2,520 days, which equals 7 years, that the Bible made known to us. Christians are not familiar with the year level of this period, which God is also applying secretly in fulfilling his plan on earth. Meanwhile, note why God programmed the lifespan of America to consummate the last 2,520 years of this age from 490 BC. The last 2,520 days of this age, which equals 7 years, was designated also to conclude her lifespan in her total destruction at the end of what the sons of men call the Third World War. 1 day and 1 hour in Revelation 18 verse 8 and verse 10 in this regard is a reference to 7 years, the last of this age and the last of the nation of America. Now, let me cite one very conspicuous example in the history of humanity where God applied this 2,520 year period in measuring between two connected events between ancient time and this last generation of this age, which we are now. Now, notice, between 540 BC, the ancient Persian nation under the great King Cyrus launched a war campaign against the ancient Babylon, known today as Iraq. And 1980, same Iraq under the great Saddam Hussein, in reverse and in revenge, launched an aggressive 8-year war against Persia, known today as Iran, measured precisely 2,520 years. It was that war back then that brought about the fall of the Babylonian Empire in 538 BC, and which saw the rise of the Persian Empire. Similarly, the end of the Iran-Iraq War in 1988 also saw the beginning of the rise of the Iranian nation of today to a regional power. And notice that between the end of their engagements in the past in 538 BC and 1998, their engagement ended measure 2,525 years, with a difference of just 5 years. This is no coincidence. Also, one amazing or interesting thing about those wars was their remarkable timing by God. Regarding this, between 540 BC, that war commenced, and 490 BC, the last 2,520 years of this age began, which the 252-year lifespan of America was designated to consummate was 50 years. That is, when you deduct 490 years from 540 BC, that engagement began, you have 50 years. That is 50 years to the beginning of the last 2,520 years of this age. Then in our day, between 1980, Iraq hit back at Iran, and the end of the last 2,520 years of this age, which the 252-year lifespan of America was designated to consummate, also spanned 50 years. To make it clear, say that while that war in ancient time began 50 years to the beginning of the last 2,520 years of this age, the reverse repetition of the war in our time began exactly 50 years to the end of the same last 2,520 years of this age. And why those 50 years from the war in ancient time measure to the beginning of the 490 years, which measure to the birth of Christ. The 50 years from 1980 or from 81 measure to the end of the last 490 years of this age from 1540 AD, which also measure to the appearance of Christ at the end of this age, that is, at the end of the Great Tribulation. This is no coincidence. Note, in this regard, 5,040 years equal 2,520 years times 2. That is, we have 2,520 years times 2 in the period of 5,040 years with no plus or minus. Let's move forward. The 252-year lifespan of America is divided into 3 places of 84 years times 3. The Bible refers to this period as 3 generational period of her lifespan prophetically in the code of Jeremiah chapter 27 verse 7, in relation to the 3 generations of the king Nebuchadnezzar, his son, and his son's son of the ancient Babylon. This which America is the later or end time correspondence or manifestation. And God in Isaiah chapter 13 verse 22 says that her lifespan shall be shortened, meaning it shall be shortened to half the period of 504 years, which is 1/10 of the last 5,040 years of this age, even as the 252-year period of her lifespan is 1/10 of the 2,520 years of this age. That is the last one of this age. Remember that the last 5,040 years of this age, which I mentioned earlier in relation to this, measure 2,520 years times 2. Matthew chapter 24 verse 22 is a reference to shortened time, meaning half the period of a time period in relation to 3.5-year period of the 7-year period of the Great Tribulation Christ was speaking about there. So this is clear. Now, before I prove this 84-year times 3 of the 252-year lifespan of America, let me prove first the reality of this 84-year cycle and its application by God in our general history. To begin with, this 84-year cycle is a code cycle for 3 numbers symbolizing the consummate nature of the 3 members of the Godhead respectively. They are the number 14, the number 49, and the number 21. But this 84-year cycle can also be divided into 2 parts of 34 and 50, or 35 and 49. They were all applied by God in determining the history of America as the nation of Israel and the church. Let's see the reflection of this time cycle in the Bible and in the days of the Jews, and a few examples of its application in the general history of man. For more on this, see my book, The Trinity Code. Now, notice that the Torah of the Jews, also known as the Pentateuch or 5 books of Moses, reflect this time cycle. In this regard, the first book of the Torah is made up of 50 chapters, while the last is made up of 34 chapters. Together, they equal 84. And the 50 and 34 chapters reflect the 2 or one of the 2 divisions of this time cycle. Note, 7 days and 7 years in the Bible are time period for preparation and count down to the end of a significant time period for the beginning of another. Let's see some examples in relation to this 84 time cycle. The last 7 days God gave to Noah to the beginning of the flood. The last 7 days of Joshua and the Israelites to the fall of the walls of Jericho. The last 7 days of Christ for preparation to his death and resurrection, all equal 168 hours. And 168 hours equal 84 hours times 2. Therefore, half this period of 3.5 days equal 84 hours. The 7-year period of the Second World War, the last 7-year period to the rapture in the code of the day and the hour of the Lord, also in the code of Revelation chapter 18, verse 8 and 10. And the last 7-year period of the Great Tribulation, all equal 84 months each. And 84 months equal 2,520 days. Also, between 1929, the Vatican City was re-established by the Lateran Treaty of Rome, and 2013, the last pope of this age was elected, who is the current primate of this religious city, and the Catholic Church spanned 84 years precisely. Also, the church age began in the reckoning of the Spirit in the year AD 84. And that period was naturally divided into 2 parts of 34 years of the life of Christ to his death and resurrection, and the 50 years to the beginning of this period, that is the church age, which reflects the 2 divisions of the 84 time cycle. Also, the date of the beginning of the First World War, the beginning and end of the Second World War, and the date of the rebirth of the nation of Israel, etc., were all intended by God to measure 84 years to the repetition of the same in this generation, with +1 in some cases. For more on this and more examples of the reality of the cycle 84 and its application to other significant dates or events by God in our history, see my book, The Trinity Code. Now, with this knowledge and reality, let me prove the 84 years times 3, which made up the period of the lifespan of America, with facts that cannot be denied. Let's go. When you add 84 years to 1777, America was born in the calendar and in the reckoning of the spirit. It brings you to the year 1861. That was the date of the beginning of our notable civil war in our history. Then when you add the next 84 years to 1861, it brings you to the year 1945. That was the year of our birth and beginning of our notable empire at the end of the Second World War by kingdom principle. That is, birth through birth pang of war. This which is evident in Daniel chapter 7 verses 2 to 7 in relation to the birth of the last 4 Gentile kingdoms or empires of this age by or at the end of great wars. Then when you add the third and the last 84 years of the lifespan of America to 1945, it takes you to the end of her lifespan in 2029-2030, which also coincided with the end of this age at the end of what the sons of men call the Third World War. This is very clear, factual, and convincing enough. Now, let's see how God determined some other notable dates of her history from the time of her beginning with the two divisions of 84 years into 34 and 50 or 35 and 49 year periods. This which we saw earlier in the two divisions of the Torah or the Pentateuch of the Jews, and the beginning and the ending position of the 50 and 34 respectively. Remember, I said earlier that 84 year cycle can be divided into 34 and 50 or 35 and 49 year periods. So let's see it in the history of America. When you add 35 years to 1777, it brings you, that is 1777 she was born, it brings you to the year 1812. That was the date of the beginning of the popular war she fought with Britain after the end of her revolutionary war with her in 1777, which brought about her independence. Then when you add the next 49 years, which completed the first 84 years, to 1812, it brings you to 1861. That was the date of the beginning of her popular and notable civil war in her history. Then when you add the first 35 years of her next 84 years to 1861, it brings you to 1896. That was the only date of the division of her lifespan by these significant time cycles that did not record any significant event in her history in relation to God's plan. Then when you add the next 49 years to 1896, it brings you to the year 1945. That was the date of the rise of her empire at the end of the Second World War. When you add the first 35 years of her third and last 84 years of her lifespan to 1945, it brings you to the year 1980. That was the year she had an unsuccessful military engagement with Iran, or when she conducted an unsuccessful rescue mission in that country, which bettered their everlasting cat and mouse relationship, which we are still seeing today. Then when you add the last 49 years to this last 84 years of the lifespan of America to 1980, it takes you to the end of her history at her total destruction at the end of the Great Tribulation and Fourth World War, which the sons of men call the Third World War. This, I believe, is convincing enough. Also note that the last 84 years of the lifespan of the lifespan of America from the birth of her empire in 1945 is divided into 3 parts of 28 years, just as her lifespan is divided into 3 parts of 84 years, and her final judgment with 3 catastrophic judgments. The end point of each of this period, that is 28-year period, was designed by God to mark a notable event or historic moment in her history to the end of her life. Let's see it now. When you add the first 28 years to 1945 of the rise of her notable empire, it brings you to 1973. That was the date of the inauguration of her twin towers of the World Trade Center, which was the tallest building in the world at that moment. When you add the next 28 years to 1973, it brings you to 2001. Amazingly, that was the date those twin towers of the World Trade Centers were destroyed by the terrorist attacks on her, masterminded by the late Osama bin Laden. Now, there is one interesting thing about the third and last 28 years of her lifespan from 2001, that is, from 2002. That thing is the fact that Nostradamus, over 500 years ago, noted down in one of his quatrains that at the destruction of these twin towers of the World Trade Center in America, which he called man-made mountain, that America has only 27 years to her end, and that these 27 years shall be characterized by wars she will fight to the end of this age. Regarding this, the Lord revealed to me by a divine revelation that from the 2001 attacks on America, that she has 28 years to her end. This which correspond with or confirms this prophecy of Nostradamus over 500 years ago, and which confirms the 252 years lifespan of America from 1777. Because when you subtract 28 years from the end of her lifespan in 2029 to 2030, it takes you back to 2001 or 2002. This should also clear all doubt concerning the 252-year lifespan of America and the terminating point, as it is factual enough, as you can see. Let's move forward. Now, let me briefly talk about the last 4 presidents of America to her end from the beginning of the 7,000 year and 4th generation from creation. That is, the 2,166 years from creation. America, under principle, has 4 presidents to rule to her end of her existence in 2029 to 2030 from the beginning of 7,000 years from creation. The first was George W. Bush, who was her first president in the 7,000 year and 4th generation from creation, which is the concluding millennium of this age. The second was Barack Obama, who was her first African American president. The third was Donald Trump, who is technically her last male president. The fourth and last, as fourth and last go together, is technically the female vice president of the next administration, which makes her the first and the last female president of her history. Though we might be seeing or hoping to see a male president, which is the oldest president to be elected in our history, as her next president after Donald Trump and after the imminent 3-day global darkness that is coming upon this generation. But in the spirit, by principle, and according to God's plan, this first female vice president shall be her last president. This is because this next administration, after this current one, is her fourth from the beginning of the 7,000 year and 4th generation from creation, and is recognized in the spirit as a binary administration, as fourth is associated with binary or binary system. In a binary system, as the binary star Sirius, which has Sirius A and Sirius B, there is rotation of position between the two bodies which make up the system. This is what we shall be seeing in the next administration from this of Donald Trump, which is binary in nature. In binary system, like the star system, for example, it is the male aspect that is seen, but behind it is the female aspect. The rotation begins with the male aspect, which is more visible, and ends with the female aspect, which is behind the male aspect. But this period of rotation is seen as one and not two. That is, in the spirit, in spiritual reckoning, this kind of administration, binary administration, is though it has 2 parts, but it's seen as one period. In this light, the next administration after the current one shall be having 2 phases or parts, as fourth usually have or come with 2 divisions into 2 parts. Plainly, the female vice president of the next administration of America shall be concluding her presidency to her end. Note, in the spirit, fourth is identified with feminine and usually have two divisions. Reason the fourth and technically the last administration of the nation of America from the beginning of 7,000 years must be from the Democrat Party, which is spiritually identified with the female aspect of her political system or party system. This is the administration that shall be dividing Jerusalem, the throne place of God on earth, into two, as fourth goes with division and division into two parts. And when this happens, the Lord in Joel chapter 3 verses 1 to 2 says he would plunge this world into a great tribulation the world have ever and will never again experience. This is no joke. Now, for the confirmation of fourth whatever having two divisions or having to do with division into two, see it that it was in the day of the fourth king of Israel that the kingdom of Israel, the United Kingdom of Israel, was divided into two, into northern and southern kingdoms. In Daniel chapter 7, we can see that the fourth and last beast or empire to rule the world to the end of this age has two parts. The first part, which is the Roman Empire, or began as the Roman Empire, and the second part is the revived Roman Empire, as prophecy interpreters refer to it. Another example of this is the Arab-Israeli War of 1973, dubbed the Yom Kippur War or the Ramadan War, which was the fourth and biggest Arab-Israeli war. That fourth Arab-Israeli war brought about the subsequent division of the Arab or Muslim world against themselves. Reason they've not been able to launch another war of coalition against Israel since that experience in 1973. Until date, they still remain divided over Israel. Finally, the fourth generation from creation in 1999, which God designated to conclude this age, has two parts. The part intended to conclude this age with the Great Tribulation or the Third World War, as men call it, and the part that shall be experiencing the millennial reign of peace and righteousness on earth through Christ. It is this phenomenon that influenced the two divisions of the fourth administration of the nation of America from the beginning of the fourth generation from creation, and her involvement in the division of Jerusalem into two, which lies in the region of the fourth tribe of Israel, Judah. Remember that it is the Democrat Party of America that is concerned or more interested in the division of Jerusalem into two on the pretext of world peace, coming on the platform of withdrawal to the 1967 border prior to the time Israel got Jerusalem back from the Arabs. This is factual enough. Let's move forward. There is another secret about America not known to the Americans and the world generally. That secret is her fulfillment of the principle of 10 minus 1, 7 minus 1, and 7 minus 1 by death in relation to a primordial phenomenon in heaven having to do with the fourth principal dimension of God and its repetition with Satan in the day of his rebellion in heaven. This mystery began in the fourth principal dimension of the unmanifest God in the day of the divine process which brought about the emanation of the fundamental being and subsequent creation of all things from that aspect of him. It has to do with the death, that is, transformation of the 10th part or 10th aspect of the lowest aspect of the low aspect of God, which is also the seventh of the two divisions of the lowest aspect of the low aspect of God. So it was death, that is, transformation of the 10th or one of the 10th, which is yet the seventh of the two divisions of that aspect of God. That is where the mystery of 10 minus 1 and 7 minus 1 began. The mystery of 12 minus 1 in death also originated in that phenomenon that was in relation to Satan among the 12 high priests of heaven. Also the family members of Satan which fell with him from heaven, which make up one part of the 12 families of the angels of God in heaven. And then the repetition of the same on earth with reference to the 12 tribes of Israel and one of the tribes that got lost with reference to the tribe of Dan. and then the 12 primary disciples of Christ, with the -1 also, with reference to Judas Iscariot. Let's see it. Regarding this mystery, note, after each primordial occurrence in the fourth principal dimension of God, way to determine the universe and all the entire heaven and anything called angels and the salt, and the mystery of 10 - 1 and 12 - 1 began with Satan. That was through his rebellion in heaven, which brought about his death, that is, rejection from among the group of the first fruit, that is, firstborn of angels in heaven, which were 10 in numbers, which he was a part. Regarding 12 - 1, before his fall, Satan was one of the 12 prominent high priests of heaven, with reference to the 7 spirits of God, the 4 living creatures of God, and Satan himself. Together, they made up the number 12 in this regard. Same applies to his family members among the 12 families of the angels of God in heaven after their judgment by God. Also, Satan was among the prominent 7 of the group of 10 firstborn of angels in heaven, but got lost as a result of his rebellion. So we can see the origin of the mystery of 10 - 1, 12 - 1, and 7 - 1 in death resulting from idolatry and all which go together with it. Let's see practical examples of this reality on earth in relation to the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 disciples or primary disciples of Christ, the Roman Empire, and then the nation of America under this point. You will definitely find this very interesting and convincing. In the examples, the nation of Israel was originally made up of 12 tribes. Out of the 12 tribes, one got lost along the way of their history via idolatry, with reference to the tribe of Dan. This tribe corresponds to Satan in terms of security or protection, which it was meant to offer to the 12 tribes during their marching order in the wilderness when they came out of the land of Egypt. The Bible tells us in Ezekiel chapter 28 verses 14 to 16 that Satan was a security entity in creation. And in Genesis chapter 49 verses 1 to 17, Jacob, the father of the 12 tribe of Israel, spoke about this tribe of Dan going the way of Satan via idolatry along the journey of their history, in confirmation of its connection with Satan. Dan got lost from the 10 tribes which made up northern kingdom of Israel when the United Kingdom of Israel was divided into 2 parts. So out of the 10 tribes, Dan was lost. By implication, it is no longer part of the 12 tribes in fulfillment of the principle of 12 - 1. In the case of the 12 disciples of Christ, Judas Iscariot, whom Christ also called or identified with Satan in John chapter 6 verse 70, got lost from among the 12. Also see Luke chapter 22 verse 3 in this regard. Are we following? Regarding 10 - 1, notice that the Bible in Isaiah chapter 24 verses 19 to 20 implies that the planet Earth shall be lost at the end of the millennial age, when humanity shall begin a new revolution in another planet in our solar system, which shall occupy the current position of planet Earth. In regard to this, planet Earth is one of the 10 members of our solar system, including the Sun, in the reckoning of the Spirit. In relation to this, in pages 27 and 28 of his book entitled The Greatest Revelation of Our Time, Professor Ike Nathan Uzoma, harbinger of the Last Covenant, stated that the Lord revealed to him that it shall come to pass at the end of the millennial reign that the planet Earth shall descend as a cold orbit to the space of the lowest part of the universe, while the planet Venus will take its place. You can also see this in Job chapter 9 verse 6 and in Revelation chapter 20 verse 11. Check them out for yourself for confirmation of this disclosure. Regarding 7 - 1 in death, the Roman Empire is one of the 7 major empires of biblical reckoning, determined to rule this world to the end of this age. In Revelation chapter 13 verse 1 to 3, the Bible spoke about the death of this empire before it got revived in the last part of this age. That death came in 1453 AD at the hands of the Ottoman Empire. Now, let's see how America was destined to fulfill this principle of 10 and 7 - 1 in death. First, America, or North America generally, is one of the 7 continents of the world. Second, America was one of the 10 major colonial powers of the world in the past. Third, America via California is one of the 10 zones of occult powers on Earth from which they coordinate planet Earth according to the schemes of Satan for this world of man. And fourth, the region of America is one of and is the first of the 10 economic regions of the world as divided by the Club of Rome. Seen earlier, she shall be obliterated from the map of the world at the end of the Great Tribulation in the quotes of Isaiah chapter 13, verses 19 to 22, Revelation chapter 18 and chapter 16, verses 17 to 19. In this way, America shall be fulfilling the principle of 7 minus 1 in relation to the continent of America, or a part of it which she occupies out of the 7 continents of the world. Then 10 minus 1 in relation to her erasure from the history or record of the former 10 major colonial powers, 10 economic regions of the world, and the 10 zones of occult operation and coordination of the planet Earth. This is factual enough in this regard. Let's move forward. Unknown to Americans and the entire people of the world, the August 21st, 2017 3-day solar or total eclipse over America signified the beginning of her last 14-year Passover period to the time of her death at the end of her 252-year lifespan. This might sound incredible to you, but it is nothing but the truth. That 3-day darkness over her signified her last 14-year period of passing over to the time of her death, as Passover, death, and 3-day or 3-hour period and firstborn go together. Concerning this, remember that America is the firstborn nation of the new world or modern history of man. And 3-day or 3-hour period of darkness coming with death of firstborn, that is the death of firstborn, particularly can be seen in the death of all the firstborn of the Egyptians during the 3-day period of darkness over the land and the subsequent Passover of the Hebrews out of that land. This principle was also fulfilled by Christ on the cross on the day of his Passover death at the end of a 3-hour period of darkness. The end of that period brought about the emanation of some of the saints of God long dead and confined in the heart of the earth in fulfillment of this principle. You can see this in Matthew chapter 27, verses 45 to 53. Same is the last 84 years of this generation and of this age from 1949, whose last 14-year Passover period shall commence with the rapture of the church at the end of a 3-day catastrophic global darkness which is imminent. The message on this 3-day global darkness shall be my last video to that event which is gravely close. Note, by principle, that day shall also witness the death and final casting down of all the firstborn of Satan to earth from the second heaven above. They've been hanging in repetition of the punishment of the gods of the Egyptians during the Passover events of the Hebrews out of that land. You can see this in Exodus chapter 12, verses 1 to 12. Meanwhile, the rapture day of their fall from above in the form of stars is recorded in Matthew chapter 24, verses 29 to 31, Revelation chapter 6, verses 12 to 17, and in Isaiah chapter 24, verse 22. Note this, because the day of their fall shall coincide with the time of one of the annual showers of meteors, the Antichrist and our scientists will use that to convince and confuse the people of the world that frightful sight they've just heard is nothing but meteor showers. Again, take note of this. Note, 3-day or 3-hour transition period to another day by principle is evident or can be inferred from the 3 dark day period of one of the phases of the moon between the other phases of light. And this period, an event coming at the end of the last 7 years of the church age from 2014, is also reflective or is in display in the 3 3-day period of the 3-day dark period of the face of the moon, coming at the end of the 7 phases of light. This is also factual and convincing enough, I should believe. In conclusion of this message, note America has a spirit prince assigned to her. He, as America, is a very proud and blasphemous spirit, and he is of the fallen angels of Lucifer, impersonating the prince of the nation of Israel and the God of the universe. This spirit prince of America has a strong place located in planet Venus, whose pentagrammic path in space, Washington, D.C., and by implication, White House was aligned with. This city is also reflected in the pentagrammic street layout of Washington, D.C., designed by the Masons ruling over America. The name of this spirit prince of hers is Anne, capitalized and abbreviated A-N. The abbreviation of North America to N-A, capitalized, was intended to reflect the name of this spirit prince of her. And when reversed, or when read from right to left, which is the pattern of spirits in reading, N-A becomes A-N, which is the abbreviation of the name of her spirit prince. Same applies to the reversal of the abbreviated name of this spirit prince of hers, which makes it to reflect the abbreviation of North America. So it is vice versa. Remember that I brought to our notice earlier the cosmic principle whereby a nation, a people, or an individual is meant to bear the name of their or his spirit prince or guide. And we saw an example of the nation of Israel and Christ, her spirit king and God, in relation to the name Israel seen earlier in Isaiah chapter 49 verse 3 and other portions of the Bible I referenced. Interestingly, the spirit prince of America is also bears the name Elam, which a part of Iran bears to date. This spirit prince of America, together with the female demon ruling over planet Earth through the occult kingdom of the earth she presides over, are the ones ruling over the earth on behalf of Satan. And the headquarters of the female demon, this female demon, is located in a spiritual city in the region of Elam in Iran called NU, also abbreviated and capitalized NU. The spirit prince of America is physically but indirectly ruling over the earth through America in New York City via UN, also abbreviated and capitalized UN. Like North America and the abbreviated name of this spirit prince of America, when you reverse NU, which is the abbreviation of the seat place of the female demon ruling over the earth spiritually from Iran, it displays UN, which is the seat place of the spirit prince of America ruling over the earth physically through America. What we are seeing here, what we are seeing in all these, is the simultaneous rulership of the planet Earth by two great agents of Satan in Iran spiritually and in and through America physically. This polarized or oppositional form of the rulership of the planet Earth is the mystery behind the great enmity between Iran and America since the revolution of Iran in 1979. The people of the world are unaware of this, and why this contention, opposition, and political friction can only be resolved on a military ground. This is coming in no time. Now, for where I got some of the information presented here, see pages 72 to 83 of the book entitled Occult Grandmaster Now in Christ, Volume 1, by the popular Professor Ike Nathan Uzoma, Harbinger of the Last Covenant. Let me stop here. Now, I believe I've been able to prove so many things about America to us, which hitherto the Americans and the general world have no knowledge of, with reference to her 252-year lifespan from the year 1777 in a reckoning of the spirit, and her last 10 years from 2031, her last president or administration from this 2021, which is a binary administration, her last 28 years to her final destruction from 2021, which Nostradamus also spoke about over 500 years ago, her establishment by Satan himself, her status as national expression of Satan on earth as Israel is to our God, the confirmation of her 84 years times 3 lifespan, etc. Her last 14-year Passover period to the time of her death from the 3-day darkness she experienced in 2017. Her fulfillment of 10-1 and 7-1. The mystery behind her perpetual enmity with Iran and more. For more hidden things or information concerning the life of America which no humans ever knew about, see my book, The Trinity Code. For more of my video messages concerning America and the imminent rapture coming at the end of a few days from the end of the imminent 3-day global darkness, and my video dealing with COVID-19 fulfilling the midnight hour parable of the 10 virgins of Matthew chapter 25 verses 1 through 14, and other videos, search for Harbinger of the Last Trump or Harbinger of the Last Covenant at Facebook video search area. You will get them all there. Note, searching them under Harbinger of the Last Covenant does not make me the Harbinger of the Last Covenant or an impostor of his person. That is the way Facebook displays my video. That is, when you search for Harbinger of the Last Covenant, please take note of this. Meanwhile, you can contact me on Facebook at Kenneth Ogra or email me at kennechogra53@gmail.com. My phone numbers are on the screen. Remember, the rapture is imminent, so get prepared in order to join the rescue train of the rapture when the Lord comes. Forward this link of the video to as many as you can to alert them and also get them prepared for the imminent rapture at the end of the imminent 3-day global catastrophic darkness, or 3-day global darkness coming with great catastrophic events. Your reward awaits you in heaven. Remain rapturable. God bless you for watching and listening. Maranatha.